Welcome to the Productivity Pulse. This is our third episode, and Sue and James join me as usual. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
Hi, James. Thank you for joining my co-host. So we're coming out of Christmas at the time we're recording, and we've probably passed the point of saying Happy New Year to everybody by now. But I suspect we've all received a parcel or picked up a parcel pre or post that period. Some of those journeys will have been smooth, some may be a bit agitated, and you may have gone and bought something else in the shop when you were there or not. And I know, Sue, you wanted to kind of touch on this today around the whole parcel retrieval collection and share some kind of stats you've seen from a culmination of 3 or 4 studies over the last quarter or so.
Yes, and obviously parcels have become, it's a standard thing that particularly convenience type locations are looking for extra services that they can offer their customers that will help bring them to their shops to buy things. And parcels is something that most of them will offer. And actually, at times, it can be a huge challenge when there's big parcel volumes because, we see people struggling with huge mountains of things, which has impact for the store operation and also for the customer collecting the parcels too.
So we've got peaks, clearly, Christmas being one. I assume when you say other peaks, you're talking about the Black Friday month that now there's other events throughout the year. I suppose maybe Easter, not so much, depending on your business, hiring DIY. You've got kind of seasonal events. I'll hazard a guess, a couple of minutes maybe, but what's the kind of typical durations you're seeing where people are coming to collect a parcel and wait as a customer?
For customers, our average has gone down actually. It used to be about 1.5 minutes, and the typical retail average that we see now is closer to 1.25 minutes. So generally it's been coming down. The best in class that we've ever seen is about 27 seconds, and that was a purpose-built unit that was specifically for parcel pickup and had sort of pigeonhole type arrangement behind it. The longest we've seen have been horrifically long in some ways. So the longest average that we've seen is about 3 minutes, and that's an average. So, for every customer that was waiting 2 minutes, a customer was waiting, 4 minutes to get that average sort of thing. And it's driven by a couple of things. It's driven by one, how far the colleague has to walk to get the parcel. So if the counter's right at the front of the shop, the parcel's in the warehouse, it's a long walk and back. And then it's also driven by, is there a retrieval system, or do you literally walk into a room or a cupboard that's just rammed full of parcels and you just search through every one until you find the one that you're looking for? So they're the main drivers of it. But
and when you say retrieval system, for those that maybe haven't seen one or worked with them, what does that usually mean?
So a retrieval system, it could be as simple as putting them in alphabetical order by surname that's being collected. That has some challenges because how do you make sure you've got enough A and B boxes, for example, that can cope with a huge parcel and a small parcel and all the rest of it? And then you do get variations in the volume of names that go by a certain letter. So I know from my time as a pharmacist when we used to organise things alphabetically then, you don't get many that's the end with X and Z, but you get, some letters you get lots and lots of. So that's quite a challenge. So what a lot of places have is they'll have a system where you might have the customer's name. It's best if it's done digitally, that you take the customer name and it tells you this customer's parcel is in post box G3 and you go straight to it and it's there. So that's the sort of thing I mean by a retrieval system. It's finding the parcel you need quickly.
So I might be being naive here, Sue, because I order parcels to be collected in retailers all the time, whether it's click and collect or whether it's just, deliver a third-party parcel to a pickup point. I assume brands have standard ways that they deal with these retrieval systems, or do they just leave it to chance and leave it to the local locations to arrange it themselves?
Unless it's going in a locker, which is a sort of different thing. So if the brands are putting it in a locker, then it's use a retrieval system. Otherwise, literally a brand will walk in with a big or a small pile of parcels, hand them over the counter. And if you think most of these retailers that are doing parcel services will be doing more than one service, so they might have pickups with 3 or 4 different brands. So they can end up with, a big mix of different stuff that they've got behind the counter or wherever it is that they've stashed it all.
So as a consumer, right, it's a bit of a lottery when I walk through the door how long it's going to take the team to find my parcel.
Yes, potentially. And it's interesting, you get some real hotspots for both click and collect and then these parcels. So you'll get some shops that are just busier than others. And it depends on things like shops that have got a good car park outside or ability to park outside tend to be busier than ones where you can't get there with a car. So it sounds obvious, but there are, retailers that deal with this. They'll know you can get big variations in the volumes that you get by store. If it's near a school and people are doing the school run, there's all sorts of factors that can mean it's a really busy parcel stop.
And so if you have this disparate service across your locations, or you're a store manager, what's the first thing you'd look at? If you're seeing it's taking 2-3 minutes to find a parcel, what's the first thing you'd look to do?
The first thing is to try and find a way of keeping those parcels close to where the handout point is, which is usually at a kiosk or a counter. In an ideal world, and where you're seeing new convenience stores open, it's being designed in that there'll be a storage cupboard, or they'll pull the cash taking bit forward slightly to create a void space behind where there's actual storage. So that's the ideal way to do it. It's a real challenge when you've got perhaps a small cramped store, you've got an existing building that if you don't want to spend a lot of money putting that in, then that's where you end up with the compromises. But the idea is that you build a storage space near it. And that's what a lot of the bigger brands that have got more room to play with have been able to do as well.
Yeah, now maybe I'm cheating a bit here, because I can see that 2/3 of the time on the average parcel collection is walking and retrieval. So that's clearly where the biggest area is. If the parcels are close, then it's about that retrieval system, knowing whose parcel is where, I guess.
Yeah, but the big thing is, can you get them closer? The answer might be that you can't. And that's a big challenge. But then you can have a think about, well, is this a suitable place to have parcels or not? Or how do we do it? Some brands have used a cage on the sales floor where they put the parcels in. So they've got no other solutions, and they'll put a roll cage, but they put a shroud around it with a zip or whatever, so that people can't grab the parcels. Because that's the other thing, is if you leave parcels out on display, there's a real risk that they can get stolen for somebody to find out what's in it. So, you do have to think about keeping them safe as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a minefield. I'm skeptical about when I order a parcel. I typically go to the shop, pick it up, and then head off. I don't generally browse the store or buy anything else, but I don't know how typical that is. I mean, from our data, how much business is this actually adding to these retailers? Are they is this a loss leader for them, but it's worth getting people in the store because they're buying stuff, or are most people just coming in, taking up the time, and then leaving again?
I guess if it's the shop that you regularly go to for your parcels, you probably use it as your shop for other regular things. So when you need a pint of milk, it's perhaps the one that you go to most as well. There's probably a halo effect that you can't see directly. When we've studied it and we've looked at transactions where people are dropping off and picking up parcels, it can be between 10 to 25% of those transactions also have a purchase in them. Now, that's likely to understate it slightly, because if I come in with a massive armful of parcels, drop them off, and then I go and buy my shopping, obviously that wouldn't show up in the same transaction, in the same interaction at the counter. But that's the sort of halo effect that we'll see.
Okay, so like 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people is going and doing a shop at the same time. So I mean, it feels like it could be driving footfall, and a real benefit for those brands. Then it was kind of different from what I expected.
You've talked, Sue, a lot about parcels being collected. Clearly, these journeys tend to be two-way as well, so you can drop off returns now in a lot of places. Does that cause a similar headache?
Yes, because what are you going to do with them? You do occasionally see places where they've had a load of returns and nobody's managed to move them yet. And we've seen, colleagues struggling to move behind the counter because there's so many parcels there. So yeah, it's that same headache. Where are you going to put them? How are you going to store them? And it's how you then put them somewhere safely, so that when the delivery driver or whoever, the courier, comes to collect them, then you can hand them over in the way that they need them as well.
And then I have one question, if it's okay, just about how you would organise who looks after the parcels in the store. So I imagine if you are in a small convenience store and somebody comes in to collect a parcel, you're the only person at the till. You can't leave the till unmanned, I'd imagine, while you're going to look for parcels. Like how do brands deal with that, and how does that have a knock-on effect on productivity in other parts of the store?
It can do. So it's a mix. So it depends on your layout and whether you can lock your tills, and kind of what level of risk products that you've got there. So some places you kind of can leave the till, particularly if you can, you just pop in somewhere very close. And others, they'll have to, in an ideal world, they'd have like headsets or a radio or something that they then call another colleague. That does mean that it's interrupting. So that other colleague will usually be putting stock on. Not when in convenience type stores, you're usually talking there's just a small handful of colleagues or even two. So there aren't a huge number of people to choose from. So it's whoever's available, and they're probably doing something else when they get interrupted.
And headsets must have helped that situation.
Yes. Yeah, it's by far the best way to do it. And in DIY, so it's a bigger shop, but, some of the brands are trialing where there's a pickup point. So as a customer, when you're going to collect your order, you go to the pickup point and there isn't a colleague there, because we all know that having a colleague standing waiting in case a customer comes is not generally a good use of time. So you press a button and that connects you to a colleague with a headset that can then find out what parcel name you're for, go and get it for you, and then meet you back at the collection point. So obviously it does interrupt the colleague from what they were doing, but it's beneficial in that you're not having somebody hanging around waiting. It means you've got one less service point that you have to have covered for.
People have played with collection lockers as well in terms of 24 hours, so they're outside the store, so almost the in-post type locker situation, which feels like a good alternative, but clearly comes with some operational challenges of if people don't collect, how do you keep them stocked? There's a cost of the units, which is significant as well. So is that something you're seeing more of, Sue, or just in kind of isolated trials at the moment?
We're seeing quite a bit of it. Generally, it doesn't have much of an impact on the store team because, it's the third party that are using that space. So they'll be the people that come and empty the lockers, do what needs doing with it. But I mean, as you'll know from trying to drop off a parcel, lockers aren't always the answer, are they?
Yeah, and we've seen retailers try and utilise them to put their product in as well, haven't they? So rather than collect from the shop, you collect from the locker.
Yes, yeah.
And again, that seems to be smaller, isolated trials at the moment rather than widespread.
Yes. It's interesting. We have seen some lockers used quite innovatively for hot food takeaway, where they've got heated lockers where, I know we've seen quite a few times the phenomenon of drivers, often cycle riders for the various delivery companies, trying to struggle alongside customers in the usual counter bit to get parcels, and kind of how they can use heated lockers to give them a lot of them are now setting up dedicated driver pickup zones, and using heated lockers again means that they can avoid having a colleague having to cover those 2 points.
So it feels like there's still potentially a way to go with this to make it easier for certainly the retailers that are doing this and the hospitality companies, quicker for customers, which is if that's what they want, or maybe they want it longer for customers so they spend more time in the store and buy more. And it feels like it's further on than maybe the whole Deliveroo Uber Eats piece that's still in its infancy and people are struggling to get their heads around, and that's a whole other podcast in itself. Is that fair to say too? People have made progress, but as store designs change, as technology changes, there's still opportunity.
Yeah, generally people have made progress, and it tends to be you make a big step change in your progress, because actually if you sort out your locations, then it's that drives the time difference. So that's, as I said, easy in a new store. You design it in. It's quite a challenge when you've got existing locations.
And just to finish with, since Christmas, people like ASOS have come out and they're going to start to charge customers for returns now if it's over a certain threshold. So you can't just buy £100 worth of stuff and send £90 back. They don't want that because there's clearly a cost involved both ways. As people start to focus on wider costs in their business and returns, and the kind of third-party logistics stuff will be huge. Do you think that's going to drive volume back if it's easier to return to a store or free to return to a store, or do you think volume will plateau or even decline?
I don't know, and I don't think we've seen any evidence yet of where that's going. It does amaze me kind of that people pay relatively high amounts, it seems to me, for delivery and then potentially to return it as well. So I think it'll depend on how price sensitive people are to these things, because you could say, well, it becomes a deterrent and you buy less. But actually, if you're not price sensitive about delivery costs, then it won't be an issue and you'll carry on as you were.
James, to finish on, I suppose, a consumer's point of view, if you put your buying hat back on, if you had to pay to send things back or it's free to drop it off in store, would that encourage you to go into the store and have a walk around and drop it off? Or would you just kind of think, well, it's just part of the overall price?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I suspect my wife's approach would be different, but I would do everything I could to avoid the charge.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm not a big buyer of stuff online though. I mean, I'm waiting to see how this changes. Like, clearly all of these services add complexity in stores, make it more difficult for people to do their jobs, make it harder to deliver customer experiences. At some point, somebody's going to say, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. He's going to try and put the genie back in the bottle, to mix a metaphor. I'm really fascinated to see if that happens this year and people start saying, do you know what, we've got a hub for this kind of thing, or go somewhere else because we don't want to do it anymore. It's too complicated.
I agree. It's going to be an interesting year for all sorts of reasons we've talked about before and we will talk about on future podcasts. So thanks once again, James. Thanks, Sue, and we'll catch up on the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.